I've been working as a wedding photographer for about 5 years now, and I've seen my fair share of unusual gigs. I've dealt with pushy brides, last-minute changes, overbearing in-laws, and one groom who almost fainted right before saying I do. But nothing could have prepared me for this particular wedding, which, without exaggeration, was chaos wrapped in uncertainty. Back in February, I got a call from a woman named Elise. She and her fiancé, Ben, were looking for someone to capture their wedding in late June. Elise had found me on Instagram, loved my portfolio, and wanted to lock me in as soon as possible. During our initial call, she seemed sweet but distracted. She kept talking to someone else in the room, and half of my questions were answered with, "Oh, we'll figure that out later." I asked the standard things. Date, June 30th. Location, we're still finalizing, but somewhere in the Lake Dorrington area. We'll keep you posted. Ceremony time, probably morning. We were thinking a sunrise wedding, but we'll confirm closer to the date. In my experience, couples who don't have their venue nailed down 4 months out usually end up scrambling, but I decided to give them the benefit of the doubt. I took down all the details I could, sent over my contract, and reminded her to keep me updated as things solidified. She paid a deposit within an hour, but she never signed the contract. At the time, I didn't push it. She had paid, and that usually signals commitment. Big mistake. Over the next 3 months, I reached out several times, polite reminder emails, quick texts, even an Instagram DM. All went unanswered. By mid-May, my unease had turned into frustration. I'd marked June 30th off my calendar, turned down another inquiry for that date, and yet I still had no concrete information about where I was supposed to be or when. On June 10th, with the wedding just 20 days away, I decided to give Elise a call. She didn't pick up. I tried Ben. No luck. I sent another round of texts. "Hey Elise, just checking in to confirm your ceremony time and location for June 30th. Want to make sure I'm all set on my end." No response. At this point, I started to worry that I'd been ghosted after blocking off a prime weekend. But then I remembered they'd mentioned other vendors during our February call. I dug through my notes and reached out to one of them, a florist who was also booked for June 30th. What she told me made my jaw drop. "Oh, didn't they tell you? The wedding got moved. It's now at Sunrise Point near Clearwater Lake, about 3 hours from you. Ceremony's at 5 a.m., and they are doing a 2-mile hike up the trail before the vows. You didn't get the updated timeline." I almost dropped my phone. Not only had Elise and Ben not told me about location change, but they'd also scheduled the ceremony at 5 a.m., requiring me to leave my house around 1:30 a.m., and expected me to lug 40 pounds of camera gear on a 2-mile uphill hike. I texted Elise again immediately. "Hi Elise, I just spoke with florist's name and heard that the venue and schedule may have changed. Can you please confirm?" A full day later, I got her reply. "The plan hasn't changed." That was it. No details, no explanation, just a vague, cheery brush-off. I sat there staring at my phone, torn between disbelief and anger. What plan was she even talking about? The plan where she never gave me a time or address in the first place. I tried reaching out again, this time a little firmer. "I just want to confirm the exact address, call time, and schedule. I need to make sure I can accommodate travel and logistics. Please get back to me by tomorrow." No answer. At this point, my gut was screaming at me to cut my losses. I could already see how this would play out. I'd drive 3 hours in the dead of night, possibly to the wrong place, only to find out they'd changed plans again. Or worse, I'd miss the ceremony entirely and they'd blame me for ruining their wedding. I called my best friend, who's also in the industry, and vented. "I don't even have a signed contract. They've ignored every message I've sent for months. And now I find out I'm supposed to hike up a mountain at 3 in the morning with my gear." Her advice was blunt. Cancel. Refund the deposit, cut your losses, and don't let them drag you into their mess. It's not worth the headache. That night, I drafted a refund message. My stomach knotted with dread. Canceling a wedding just days before the date goes against every professional instinct I have. But what choice did I have? How was I supposed to do my job with no reliable information? By June 26th, just 4 days before the wedding, I reached my breaking point. I had done everything a professional could do, emails, texts, calls, even contacting other vendors, and still had no concrete details. The only thing I knew for sure was the date, and even that I wasn't entirely confident about anymore. I sat at my desk rereading our February email chain, and felt a dull ache in my stomach. No signed contract, no confirmed time, no finalized location, and now a 3-hour drive, a pre-dawn start, and an uphill hike with my gear? It was insanity. I kept picturing myself arriving at some random overlook at 5 a.m. only to find no one there, or worse, a furious bride blaming me for ruining her big day. After a restless night's sleep, I finally drafted the message I'd been dreading. "Hi Elise, given my multiple attempts to contact you and the fact that I have not received crucial information about your wedding, including the exact location, time, and schedule, and we are now just a few days out from your date, I unfortunately have to treat this as a de facto cancellation. I have been in contact with your other vendor, and the information they provided does not match what we discussed on our initial call. I can't safely perform my job with the details I have, and I can't be sure any of it is accurate. I'll be sending you a full refund since this cancellation is so last minute, and I wish you both the best. My finger hovered over send for a good minute before I finally tapped it. Within minutes, I sent back a deposit via Venmo. I slumped back in my chair, a mix of disappointment and relief washing over me. I figured that was the end of it. Maybe I'd get a confused text or angry call later, but at least the weight of uncertainty was off my shoulders. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Elise. For the first time in months, she was actually calling me. I let it ring once in stunned disbelief before answering. Hello. Elise here, she said breathlessly, sounding almost panicked. Please don't cancel. I'm so sorry. I've been meaning to get back to you. We've just been completely swamped with wedding planning and travel. I didn't mean to ignore you. Elise, I've been trying to get information from you for months, I said carefully, keeping my voice calm but firm. I have to have exact details to do my job. I've been completely in the dark. I know, she said, her voice cracking. We've been out of the country, and honestly, my planner was supposed to handle all communications. I didn't even realize you didn't have a final schedule. I'll get you everything tonight. Please don't back out. We really want you there. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Part of me wanted to hang up right then, but another part of me, the part that genuinely enjoys my work and hates turning couples away, hesitated. Elise, I refunded your deposit and told you I was canceling because I cannot, in good conscience, take a job with no confirmed details. However, if you can meet my conditions, I might reconsider. Anything, she said immediately. Just tell me what you need. I laid it all out. A detailed timeline with ceremony time, location, and schedule by 5 p.m. today. A signed contract. No excuses this time. Coverage for additional travel costs. Hotel accommodations near the venue. An updated payment to reflect the increased workload. There was a pause. We can do that, she said finally. We'll double your original payment and cover your travel. I'll also get the planner to call you directly. Fine, I said. But understand this. If I do not have a signed contract and the full details in my inbox by 5 p.m., I'm out and the refund stands. No exceptions. After we hung up, I sat there in stunned silence. I hadn't expected her to agree to my terms so quickly. By late afternoon, I had an email from Elise with a rough schedule and a confirmation of the new venue, Sunrise Point, near Clearwater Lake. Ceremony start. 5 a.m. guests would hike 20 minutes up the trail before sunrise, with a ferry ride across the lake scheduled afterward. She'd also attached proof of an additional payment and a booking confirmation for a hotel. I scanned the details, feeling a twinge of unease. The 20-minute hike was likely closer to 45 minutes with my gear, and the hotel they'd booked for me turned out to be 4 hours away from the venue. I flagged that as a potential issue, but at this point, I wasn't even surprised. I sent back the updated contract, adding several clauses. If the location changed again without adequate notice, I would leave and keep all payments. If I was required to hike longer than 20 minutes with my gear, I would stop where I was. Any additional travel beyond what was agreed upon would require compensation. Elise signed the contract within the hour. For the first time in weeks, I felt a tiny spark of relief. At least now, if things went off the rails, I had legal protection. And yet, a nagging voice in my head whispered, "You know this is still going to be a mess, right?" I left my house at 2 a.m., bleary-eyed and running on less than 3 hours of sleep. My car was loaded with camera gear, spare batteries, tripods, and enough rain covers to outfit a small film crew. I hadn't even bothered to use the hotel Elise had booked for me. When I checked the address the night before, I discovered it was in a town nearly 4 hours away from the venue. I couldn't figure out if it was an honest mistake or if her wedding planner had zero idea of the area's geography. Either way, I couldn't risk driving there, sleeping for an hour, then driving all the way back. The road to Clearwater Lake was winding, dark, and eerily quiet. Every few minutes, I found myself questioning why I'd agreed to this. The nagging thought of I should have walked away gnawed at me, but by the time I reached the trailhead at 4:40 a.m., it was too late to turn back. The sun was already rising. I checked the sunrise time again on my phone. 3:45 a.m. Whoever scheduled a 5 a.m. sunrise ceremony hadn't even looked up what time the sun actually rose in that part of the state. I was the first one there. I paced the empty parking lot, fighting off the chill of dawn, and tried calling Elise. No answer. Ben's phone went straight to voicemail. I waited. At 5:15 a.m., a few cars finally pulled in, bridesmaids, groomsmen, and a few family members, all looking confused and undercaffeinated. No one seemed to know where the ceremony was supposed to take place. Isn't there supposed to be a planner? I asked one of the bridesmaids. She should be here, she said, checking her watch. Elise told us all to meet at the trailhead at 5. By 5:30 a.m., Elise and Ben finally arrived, looking frazzled but excited. Elise apologized for the delay and asked if I'd gotten any good sunrise shots. I resisted the urge to tell her the sun had been up for nearly 2 hours. We all stood around awkwardly for another 15 minutes, waiting for the planner/photographer to arrive. She finally pulled up at 5:45 a.m., hair unbrushed, juggling a camera bag and a clipboard. "Okay, everyone," she called out. "Let's hike up to the ceremony spot." I hoisted my gear and started up the trail. Elise had promised me the hike was only 20 minutes, but 20 minutes came and went, and we were still trudging uphill. By the 4 to 5 minute mark, sweat was soaking through my shirt, and my tripod kept banging against my leg. According to the contract, I was under no obligation to go further. But we were so close that I kept going out of sheer stubbornness. The ceremony site itself was stunning. Mist rising off the lake, sun streaming through the trees, and a breathtaking cliffside view. For a moment, I forgot my frustration and focused on getting the shots. I set up my tripod for the wide angles, clipped a mic to the efficient's lapel, and readied my handheld for the close-ups. Then the planner stepped directly in front of my tripod. I whispered, "Excuse me, could you move slightly? You're blocking my shot." "Oh, I'm fine here," she said without looking at me. Throughout the entire ceremony, she drifted in and out of my frame like a ghost haunting every wide shot. When I went to check my audio afterward, I discovered she'd turned off my mic. "Why did you touch my equipment?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "Oh, I thought it wasn't supposed to be on yet," she replied breezily, turning back to fiddle with her own camera. I bit my tongue and kept filming. When the vows ended, Elise announced that we'd all be heading to the lake for a ferry ride. "It's just a 10-minute drive," she assured me. It took an hour. By the time we arrived, the sun was high in the sky, and the ferry captain was explaining that the wedding party needed to have made a reservation weeks in advance. Elise turned pale. "My planner told us it wasn't necessary," she stammered. The captain shook his head. "I'm sorry, but we're fully booked today." A tense silence settled over the group. Then someone suggested hiking to a nearby waterfall for photos. It started raining halfway there. Within minutes, the trail turned into a muddy slip-and slide. My gear was protected by waterproof covers, but Elise and Ben plowed ahead in their wedding clothes, determined to get adventurous shots. When we finally reached the waterfall, Elise and Ben wanted to climb the slick, moss-covered rocks beside it. "I can get photos from down here," I told them. "No, we want you up here with us," Ben called, already halfway up. I glanced at the roaring rapids below, then back at my 30-pound camera bag. "I'm not risking my equipment or my neck on that," I said firmly. Eventually, they posed without me scaling the rocks, and I snapped what I could from a safe vantage point. By the time we got back to the trailhead, I was soaked, covered in mud, and running on fumes. I loaded my gear into the car, waved goodbye, and began the long, silent drive home. By the time I stumbled through my front door, it was past 10 p.m. I collapsed fully clothed onto my bed and didn't wake up for nearly 24 hours. Lying there the next morning, I couldn't decide if the day had been a triumph of perseverance or a complete train wreck. I'd done my job, technically, but at what cost? When I finally woke up the next day, sunlight streaming through the blinds, I felt like I'd been run over by a freight train. My muscles ached from lugging gear up that endless trail, and my camera bag was still sitting by the door, caked with mud. For a long moment, I lay there staring at the ceiling, mentally replaying the chaos of the day before. My phone was lit up with notifications. 3 missed calls from Elise, a dozen texts from Ben, and a long email from the planner. I braced myself and started with Elise's messages. "Thank you so much for yesterday," one read. "We are in love with the photos you showed us on the back of the camera. Can't wait to see the rest. Sorry again for all the confusion. We couldn't have done it without you." Ben's texts were equally enthusiastic. "You're a lifesaver. Sorry about the mix-ups. We know it was a lot, but you made it happen." I scrolled through the planner's email next. It was a long-winded apology, peppered with excuses about scheduling issues and unforeseen complications. She also wanted to collaborate on sharing photos for her website. I had to laugh at that last part. After the way she'd stood in front of my tripod for the entire ceremony and tampered with my audio, the idea of handing her my work felt almost insulting. I spent the rest of the day backing up the footage, editing a few teaser shots, and scrubbing mud off my equipment. As the images loaded on my screen, I had to admit that, despite everything, some of the shots were breathtaking. Elise and Ben silhouetted against the misty lake, raindrops glittering in her veil, the waterfall roaring in the background. It was the kind of portfolio-worthy material that makes all the early mornings and logistical nightmares almost worth it. Almost. But the more I reflected, the more I realized just how close this entire ordeal had come to disaster. I had driven 6 hours round trip on practically no sleep, hiked 4 to 5 minutes with 40 pounds of gear, and worked nearly 12 straight hours for a couple who'd given me the bare minimum of communication. One wrong step on that slick trail, one missed turn in the dark, and the whole thing could have ended very differently. Later that evening, I hopped on a video call with a friend who's also a wedding photographer. She listened with wide eyes as I recounted the whole story, from the months of radio silence to the planner's bizarre obsession with photographing her own feet. Honestly, she said when I finished, you should never have taken that job. You had every red flag in the book, no signed contract for months, no confirmed details, constant location changes. You were setting yourself up to be the scapegoat. I know, I admitted, but they doubled my rate, covered travel, and signed the contract at the last second. I thought, worst case scenario, I'm protected. Protected legally, sure, she said, but what about physically? Hiking with that much gear at dawn on no sleep? That's not safe. She had a point. I also thought about how many times during the day I considered walking away, when the planner blocked my tripod, when the ferry reservation turned out to be a fantasy, when the rain turned the trail into a mud pit. Each time, I gritted my teeth and pushed through, afraid of disappointing the couple or tarnishing my reputation. But where was the line between professionalism and self-sacrifice? Over the next few days, Elise and Ben continued to gush over the photos I sent, leaving glowing reviews on my website and Instagram. Ironically, they were one of the happiest clients I'd ever had. From their perspective, the day had been a success. But for me, the experience was a wake-up call. I realized I'd been far too lenient with my boundaries, letting clients slide on communication and contracts because I wanted to be accommodating. Going forward, I made myself a promise. Every client must sign a contract before I block off the date. No exceptions. All travel details, times, and locations must be finalized at least a month in advance. Any major changes after that will incur additional fees or cancellation. If my gut tells me to walk away, I will. The industry has a saying, you're not just getting paid to take photos, you're getting paid to deal with chaos. But even chaos has its limits. A week later, I got one last email from Elise. We just wanted to thank you again for sticking with us. We know it was a bit of a mess, but the photos are incredible and we're so grateful you were there to capture our special day. I typed back a polite reply, thanking them for their kind words. But deep down, I knew this was one gig I'd never forget, if only as a cautionary tale. Now, when I tell other photographers about the Lake Dorrington wedding, they shake their heads and laugh, half in disbelief. I always end with the same advice. Get everything in writing. And if a bride can't give you her wedding location with less than a week to go, run.